Welcome to Let's Get It, the Atheist Roundtable.
That was terrible. Let's do that again.
How's the mic? What you doing? What up with Eddie? Why he sweaty on your noodle? I don't get it. He lost his shit. The whole kid caboodle. Now pause. You alls. Everybody tell him that he's a lost cause. Who's the ass in the hat? Half Christian ass. Always talking this and talking that. And Benji on the epistemology. You got claims, got beliefs. What's your confidence? And is it relevant? Nah. Just Jeff. What's next? What text you gonna put to the test? Put to the test, little troll face weasel on TikTok looking like a beetle juice. And what do you do when a member of your crew sits in a shed with the dead? I don't know what's up. Anybody seen T Jump? Now the newest member of the crew, the TART debut. Here's your preview. It's K Navs. She says she's the live stream queen. Welcome to the team. Yeah. Welcome to the team.
The Atheist Roundtable.
Is faith a reliable pathway to truth? Hey, yo, Oz, are we going on a deep dive?
Faith is bullshit. Jesus in the morning.
Welcome to the Atheist Roundtable, and I can't laugh at the end of that every time.
I was about to say, did you have to, like, what are you holding on there? Like an extra bar? Like, what's going on there?
Well, see, what happened was I was doing a little TikTok parody video. I didn't know it was going to be used against me.
It was definitely not for the benefit of anyone else.
No, welcome to the Atheist Roundtable, TART Live show. I am Oz. Ben, what's going on, man?
Hey, man, just rocking my swag. I got a little bit of Atlanta swag for the holidays.
ATL, shoddy.
ATL. Yeah. Oh, there is a runoff election coming up. So if you live around that area, January 5th is the day.
Well, and I heard a couple folks might be meeting up down in the dirty.
That's what I hear. Do you have any more details on that?
I'll be there on the 4th.
Ooh.
February 4th, that is.
February 4th. Yeah, we're coming up. It'll feel like that. It'll go by quick.
Oh yeah, yep. So definitely looking forward to that. Get to chill out with all the peeps. So I'm looking forward to the conversation tonight, Ben, about determinism versus free will, and I won't we'll go any further than that because I don't want to give any more teasers. But really look forward to have Shane on here, and we'll intro him on here in a second. But we have some cool debates and stuff coming up. Ben, is there a couple of shows that you're looking forward to?
Well, I'm always excited for the call-in show. The call-in show that comes on every Monday night at 9. And I'm excited to hopefully join in on some of those, getting back in the groove. I know the past couple of weeks I've been a little bit further away, but I feel like just being able to talk to people who really believe in those claims. So that way we're just not talking about people. We get to talk with people.
Absolutely.
That's what I'm always about.
Yeah. So call-in shows, like Ben said, each Monday, 9 o'clock sharp. 9 o'clock sharp. We get started, and then a couple that I'll throw out there. Well, tomorrow night we have a debate. It's going to be Mike B. That's debated, I think, 3 or 4 times here now on our channel, and Eddie, Sweaty Eddie. They're going to be debating tomorrow night at 8 o'clock p.m. here Eastern time. So check that out. And then on the 17th of January, Dave Warnock will be here. You definitely want to be here for that one. And then on 23rd, like I said, we have a 6-member panel to talk about who was Jesus. That'll be exciting. Before we do anything else, let's make sure.
I saw Jeff. Apparently, you've got to angle your TikTok live a little bit better. Everybody's getting a free peep show here, and that's not to see your presence. So.
Come on, Jeff.
Yeah,
come on, Jeff.
Thank you, Chico.
Hey, Jeff.
Braxton.
Sorry. I thought we had another one pop up. Well, let's do it. Ben, without further ado, I'd like to bring our guest on, and Shane and I spoke. I want to say probably about 3 weeks ago, something like that, and we started talking. We got a date down, and this is a topic he's very passionate about and loves talking about, and I know it's something here at the round table that we love to talk about. So let's get him on here. Let's bring on Shane the Skeptic. Shane, what's up,
going on? Hey, how's it going? How are you guys been?
Doing good, man.
Doing really good. It's great to meet you.
Likewise, good to meet both of you. I'm happy to be here to talk about determinism. Free will has always been a topic, like ever since I became interested in philosophy, it's been a topic that's been like really of interest to me. And I should say that it was maybe a year and a half ago that I even actually became a determinist myself, that I stopped believing in free will, that I understood, what determinism is, why it follows from that we can't have free will. And no, philosophy in itself is something that I'm passionate about. And when it comes to determinism, hard determinism specifically, I would actually go as far as saying that free will not existing is the claim that I am most confident in within philosophy. So as opposed to when it comes to atheism, I'm not a hard atheist. I'm not somebody who makes the claim there is no God. I don't make claims to knowledge there is no God. I simply say, I do not believe in a God, and I lack any reason. I don't know, and I lack any reason to believe. But when it comes to free will, the burden of proof is on me because I'm actually making a claim. I'm actually saying free will does not exist. And when you actually want to claim something doesn't exist, you put that burden of proof on yourself. And I'm happy to meet that burden, hopefully tonight.
Awesome. Yeah, that'll lead to a lot of good discussion. So before I turn it over to Ben and let him start digging into this, or the deep dives they're called here at the Atheist Roundtable, tell us a little bit about you, Shane, as far as where can people find you, the YouTubes, Facebooks, all of those things.
Yes, I have a Facebook page and a YouTube channel that are both called Shane the Skeptic, no spaces. You can find me very easily like that. On my channel, what I have is, most importantly, I have a counter-apologetic series where I give tutorials on how to figure out fallacies and how to argue against certain obvious, really bad apologetics. And, I try to explain in the best way that I can what's wrong with them. I also have a debunking series where I cover things like, so far I only have one video, but I've debunked homeopathy. I'm very passionate about alternative medicine. It's another form of bullshit taking advantage of people. People believing in things that aren't true tends to lead to bad things happening. So I'm passionate about skepticism and critical thinking throughout the board. So again, you can find my channel, Shane the Skeptic. And if you look up Shane Isgrig debate, you'll see, you'll probably find every debate that I've ever been in.
Okay, perfect. Thanks for sharing. Right. And Ben, I'll let you get to it, man.
All right, thank you. All right, we're here. The Ben, G, the Y. or something. Oh, hey. So I guess I want to say, first of all, I watched your Ben Shapiro kind of breakdown video from a few months ago or a couple months ago. I thought it was awesome. Defending Cardi B's, it's just like, what is so insipid about Ben Shapiro's point of view, and where does he kind of lay, like what kind of foundation is he working from, and how do other people interpret that?
Right. It's also, so I should also inform you that there was a copyright claim on that video. I thought it was by Ben Shapiro. No, it turns out it's by Warner Music Group. And I believe that since it was a response video and the majority of the video was actually my own original content, that I'm within fair use. So I'm disputing the claim, and Warner Music Group has 6 days to respond. The video is public as of now. It was restricted until I disputed it. So that video might be unavailable in like 6 days. So that might be a video that if you want to see, and I'm glad you plugged it. Thank you. If you want to see that video, it might be unavailable soon. But yeah. But
I really appreciated like your thoughts on that. That helped me get to understand a little bit of where you're coming from. So definitely check that out. Cool. So tell me a little bit about free will and determinism. So like, as a guy who hasn't delved into the philosophy so deep, it's exciting for me to examine the claim free will does not exist. But for anybody who hasn't heard those terms at all, what's the dichotomy there, and why couldn't both be true, for instance?
Right. And I'm also excited because what I've come to find is when you have a discussion with an atheist about free will, this is a discussion where I'm more likely to change minds than I am if I go on a Christian channel and I talk about atheism. So this is a conversation that I think has a lot of potential in tonight. So basically, I think we all understand the idea of free will. The idea of free will is that you are able to act according to whatever you choose to do. You are able to choose freely, regardless of any external variables impacting your decisions, right? Your decisions are entirely your own. That's the concept of free will. And what determinism is this idea that everything within the universe is determined by causation within the natural world. And this would include, for example, your brain. So what my claim for determinism is basically, since everything is determined, that includes your actions. So when I finish this sentence and you are going to say something in response to it, even though you haven't said that yet, it is already the case that you are going to say it, and it already exists as much as it would if you already did it. So basically, the future exists just as much as the past does. So one of the best ways that I like to illustrate this is by putting forward this analogy of rain. So you have water evaporating, right? Mm-hmm. Now, when you have water vapor in the sky and the molecules are combining in, the water is going to become heavy enough to fall into gravity. It hasn't done that yet, so it hasn't started raining yet, but it is already determined to happen. So it can't not happen. And your actions, just like you're going to say something after this, everybody listening is going to do something after this. It already exists and you can't do otherwise. Now, if you had free will, you would have the ability to do otherwise. So if I was able to rewind time by an hour, you could demonstrate free will and what determinism separating from it is in this sense. If I was to rewind time by an hour, and every atom in the universe was in the exact place where it was, and it was moving in the same direction and at the same speed, we have no reason to think that if we rewind time, any of those atoms are going to go do anything different. If you have a pool ball on a table and it is headed toward another pool ball, we already know what happens when it collides. The other pool ball moves forward, correct? That energy.
Yeah, you could mathematically say at this velocity, this weight of a pool ball hitting at this angle. Like you could basically work that out and make a prediction and show that prediction would be true. Right.
So, and pool balls are used a lot by David Hume when he talks about inductive reasoning. But what I'm using the pool ball analogy to make is, if you have a pool ball headed toward another pool ball, it collides, it hits, it goes in the hole, whatever. If I rewind time and that same pool ball is headed toward that same other pool ball, again, it's in the same place, it's moving in the same direction at the same speed. We have really no reason to think that anything's going to occur differently, right? Mm-hmm. Well, this is also the case for your brain. We can show that the mind is material. The brain is what causes your consciousness. Your actions are determined by things within your brain, and you cannot act out of accordance with your psychology.
The experiences. I often think about like language. I couldn't choose just to be speaking Russian right now or French right now. The only words that appear in my head are in English. And a little bit of Spanish because of the Spanish classes I took in high school.
Right.
So like, is that, I guess I've always thought about consciousness or free will in terms of maybe a limited free will, where maybe you don't get to choose the things that come up in your brain, but so like, how would you respond to somebody who said that? And I see some potential weaknesses. I'm interested in what you say.
Yeah. So even the most hard determinists like myself will not deny that there is this illusion of free will.
Right.
We will not deny that it feels like we are making every decision that we're making. And it doesn't really make sense to us that we're not, as some people put it in the way of we're not making our own decisions. Well,
it could be like the illusion of that the sun is going around the earth.
Right.
That's
so,
an illusion.
So your desires are caused by your psychology. And what you're going to do is act in accordance with those desires. And you might feel like, okay, well, if I'm a kid and I'm offered an apple and I'm offered ice cream, I'm probably going to choose the ice cream. Now, if I wanted the apple, I could have chose the apple, but I was able to choose. But the reality is that if you had free will, you would have the ability to act out of accordance with your desire. So your desires are determined by your psychology, and there's nothing that you can do about that. You can't change your psychology to make yourself desire something different. Now, you might be able to choose between your desires, but you cannot choose what your desires are. So your desires, which you're not in control of, determine what your choices are.
And yeah, so you don't have any choice in your desires. And then,
right.
Yeah, and I guess that anyway, I'm interested in maybe trying to take this in a direction of like with Atheist Vanguard, you did a lot of like straight SE type approach kind of things. I'm kind of interested. I feel like I would learn a lot by maybe applying some to your claim that free will does not exist.
Sure.
Cool.
That's a great idea.
Thank you. I came up with it myself. How about that? No. How confident are you then that free will does not exist? Like in that in the negative claim, what could you put a confidence level on that?
I would go with 95%. Let's go with 95% confidence.
All right. And then what is like, is that made up of a bunch of different little facts, or are there certain facts that maybe make up like 50% of that confidence? Like without a certain fact, would you be less confident that free will does not exist? Or like, what would it, like, are you understanding kind of where I'm coming from? What are some of the pieces to that pie?
If you could show me that determinism was not true, then that is my reason for not believing in free will. So since I believe that everything within the universe is determined by causation within the natural world, if I were shown that that was not the case, then I would change my mind on my belief that there is no free will.
So is it because determinism has been shown to be true for just about everything that we can observe?
Yes.
And free will cannot be true.
Right. Free will is an illusion, and I find that free will is incompatible with determinism. So since I believe that free will and determinism are incompatible, and I believe that determinism is true, it follows from that there is no free will.
Okay. So free will, determinism are not compatible. What is, could you maybe explain why they're not? Or is it, I guess I'm kind of thinking maybe there's like umbrellas of determinism. And so maybe this kind of falls in line with.
Yes, there are. So I'm glad you asked. So if you're somebody who, like I said, is an incompatibilist like me, and you believe that free will and determinism are not compatible, and you believe in determinism, then you are a hard determinist. Now, if you were to believe that free will and determinism were compatible, and this was the compatibilist position, and you believed in determinism, then you would be what's known as a soft determinist. So there are people who accept determinism and believe that free will is compatible with it. I'm not one of those people. I don't think that free will is compatible with determinism.
Okay. I guess, okay, so because they're not compatible, and because you've come to the conclusion that determinism is true, then free will must not exist, right? Like, so if you had to put it in that very formulaic, if free will and determinism are incompatible and determinism is true, free will does not exist.
Yes.
Okay. What would an example of free will? So what kind of method did you use to discover that determinism was true or that free will did not exist? So if my understanding is that you've concluded that determinism is true, that would be like the positive inverse of the claim. So it's not that free will does not exist. It's actually that determinism is true, therefore free will does not exist.
Yeah, determinism is true, and determinism and free will are incompatible, and therefore free will cannot exist.
Okay.
Yeah.
So how did you discover that determinism was true?
So I would definitely have to say, and I'm going to try to give an answer beyond simply inductive reasoning. Inductive reasoning is really the best answer I could just like put on the table. When I look at the world that I live in, I can see that every effect within the universe seems to have a cause that I can observe. As far as I've observed, every effect happening has a cause. Now, I can actually look at a brain. I could look at psychology. We can look at which chemicals do what to the brain. So if, for example, you were somebody who was lacking a lot of serotonin in your brain, you would not be able to be as happy as somebody who has more serotonin in their brain. You cannot act out of accordance with your lack of serotonin. So you're not in control of your brain. You're not in control of your psychology. So, for example, I have a form of autism called Asperger's syndrome. I cannot act out of accordance with being autistic. It's literally impossible for me. I have to act in accordance, I have to act in accordance with my brain. So, since the brain is a material thing and effects within the material world seem to have material causes, I've reasoned out that this effect that is consciousness has a material cause. And since I'm not in control of the variables that make up that cause, I'm not in control of the effect. And if my effects are, the effect that is my decisions are determined by the activity within my brain, which I'm not in control of, then something that I'm not in control of is what is determining my choices.
So, is there? I guess I'm wondering what would. So I asked you kind of this before. If you were to be able to discover something, or because I understand, like you could basically line up point and point of evidence saying, like, if you heat up water to a certain heat at a certain altitude, it's going to turn into water vapor.
Right.
If you hit, the billiard ball at a certain angle, I can understand how you might be able to say, like, every example demonstrates this.
Right. And we would need a justification for saying that these, these effects within the universe, because we can't speak of outside the universe really, especially if we're not like cosmologists, which I'm not. But everything within the universe, every effect within the universe that is a material effect seems to have a material cause. Now, my claim is that consciousness is an effect of a material cause. So if someone were to change my mind on whether or not consciousness was determined by material things, that would be something that would actually change my mind as well. If you were to show me that I had something, for example, a soul, something within my brain independent of its physical material, chemicals and neurons that make it up, you would be making a pretty strong case for there to be the possibility of free will. The problem is that nobody's done that.
Okay. And I guess I'm still, is determinism versus free will is that on a universal scale, or is that dealing with consciousness only? or is it that consciousness would fall underneath the umbrella of free will?
Consciousness falls under the umbrella of free will. I mean, we don't assign will to objects. You know, if a boulder falls down a mountain and it hits a car, we don't reason out that the boulder like willed to do that. We only assign will to conscious things.
Yeah. So I guess that would then, if I'm thinking from like a theistic point of view, which is, you know, it's something that I think I don't deterministically, I'm going to think about more often than the average person. You know, and they say, okay, well, now our brains are no more than rocks, right? So why? And I guess maybe this would be getting further and further from the point, because I think there's a lot of good reasons to live out your life, even with that knowledge, trying to seek joy and things like that. So would you then be saying that the brain is just like that rock that's like you've got materials that are set up in a certain way, natural processes which are doomed, so to say, to fall in line given certain experiences? Is that like predetermined by something, or is it just you can't stop it, or you can't?
I would say, yeah, it is predetermined just by causation. So the same way that rock, like because of the fact that it's in a place moving in a direction at a speed where it's going to do that, like a person who has psychopathy and no treatment and is going to go kill somebody after this discussion, it is already the case that they're going to do that. And, you know, their brain is something that they didn't really control of. They didn't choose to have psychopathy, and they can't act out of accordance with their psychopathy.
Right. Yeah. It's like after what was it? They did like the ice pick up the nose. You got somebody's personality is permanently shifted. How can we discover? And I guess this would be like, I'm drawing comparisons here in my head to like the God of the Gaps argument. Like, just because we don't have an example of something exhibiting free will doesn't mean that free will doesn't exist, right? It's kind of like, I can't prove that there's not a cat in my house
in itself, but if we can reason out that determinism is true, and if we can reason to the conclusion that determinism is true and they're incompatible, then yes. Because I would agree with the point that you made, because there's it's known as the black swan fallacy in philosophy. The concept that you haven't seen something, so you know it doesn't exist. And this is the very reason why I'm not a hard atheist. Is I can't really say I know there is no God. Now, when it comes to some specific gods that have been proposed that I know are inconsistent with reality, then I can actually say that I know those gods don't exist. So, for example, I made a video recently talking about this point of the problem of evil. Now, the problem of evil doesn't disprove theism, because a god doesn't necessarily have to be omnipotent and omnibenevolent. But if you propose to me the existence of any being which is both omnipotent and omnibenevolent, then it logically follows from that there would not be anything bad. And then we can say, okay, well, things that we understand to be bad exist, and bad things existing is not compatible with a reality in which there is something that is all good and all powerful. So it's not only that we don't have an example of something all good and all powerful, it's that we have reasons to say, you know, we have examples of bad things happening, and we can reason out why it would be incompatible with our universe for there to be something that is all good and all powerful. So that same way, when it comes to free will, I'm not simply saying because we can't prove there is no free will that therefore I know there isn't free will. But since we can show that determinism is true, we can show that there's no free will.
Okay. All right. And I guess the one thing I want to wrap this kind of up with a nice gift wrap and a bow. Why should people care about free will? So you or determinism, with that knowledge that, or the belief that determinism is true and that free will does not exist, what can somebody do with that information? Why is that important?
Well, it certainly changes the way that you look at people who do things, whether they be immoral or whether they be things that maybe aren't necessarily immoral, but that you don't like. If you have a better understanding of, okay, this person actually couldn't have done otherwise, so it actually makes it easier to be more sympathetic toward them. And obviously, as a skeptic, I am against believing in things that aren't true. And since I don't believe free will exists, I want people to not believe that free will exists.
Right on. Yeah, I mean, there's a ton there that I'm right there with you. I know that there's like so much out there philosophy wise, and you were saying that you've done a lot of research in the past few weeks. It's definitely a topic that I'm interested in looking into, and I hope everybody's enjoyed hearing your perspective here. And with that,
All right.
we're going to move on.
All right.
What's up?
What's going on, man? How you doing?
Oh, just enjoying my night. Got my nice little heater here. The lights are cool. It's very mellow.
Cool.
I was
Nice.
determined before the show.
Yep. You
that
couldn't have not done it.
I couldn't have not had the heat.
You were already going to do this show. Whether so here you are.
So I think here's some concepts that I think are hard for some people to understand when it comes to determinism. So I myself follow in the same suit as a hard determinist. But here are some questions that I've gotten that I want to see, how would you answer this? So if an individual murders another individual and they were predetermined to do so from a source outside of their own body, should they be punished?
Yes.
And why do you think that is?
Because punishing people who are going to do things like that, we can show minimizes the suffering. And if we understand that we ought to do that which minimizes suffering, and let's just say locking up people who are killing people minimizes suffering, then we ought to do that. So,
but do you think that the person is responsible for what they've done?
I would say, yes, they are responsible. The question is whether or not they're blameworthy. And that's where I say, I don't know. But we have, and this is one of the first things that usually comes up when you talk about determinism with somebody is the fact that it is significantly more difficult to make sense of morality from a deterministic worldview. And I mean, that's just the truth. It is harder to make sense of morality without a belief in free will. However, that doesn't mean that therefore free will must exist. That just means it's harder to make sense of morality. And some people say, if there's no free will, there's no reason to lock people up. So I think that they're mistaken in this, and that what we need to do is we need to come up with like a philosophically consistent frame of morals and ethics that is consistent with our deterministic worldview. And what I know is that I desire well-being and pleasure, and I desire to not suffer.
Yeah.
So if I understand that the maximization of pleasure in other people maximizes my pleasure, then I have a philosophical justification for doing so, whether I have, this this free will belief or not. So I can't act out of accordance with the fact that doing a nice thing makes me feel happy. Like there's nothing I can do about the fact that, like, if I give a homeless person food, I feel good about myself. And since I know that I do feel good about myself, if I do that, I can go do something like that.
So do you think, so when you look at morality, is it fair to say that morality is also determined? Like there isn't a hard set morality and we just determine what we find to be moral?
Yeah. So I'm a moral subjectivist. I don't believe in any objective morality. And I would have to say that, morality is determined. Now, morality, evolutionarily, we could explain like why it is that we have it. So our species benefits from us. We are a social species. So we benefit from living in such a way where we're not creating the kind of world in which, bad things happen, of course. But if you have a society in which it's okay for someone to go out and kill somebody, then that society isn't going to get very far. And we can explain why that's going to happen, right?
Yeah.
So morality is something that we simply evolved to have because it benefited us as a species. And even though that's the case, it works for us.
Yeah, it's kind of like the same way with how evolution in dogs worked, where the dogs that were submissive to humans were the ones that survived because they got food from humans. Therefore, we have a species of animal that is extremely obedient to human.
Yeah.
And
if you're somebody who wants to know, like, if there's no objective morality, what reason do I have to be moral? Utility. It helps you. You live in a world where there's air conditioning because you live in a world where human beings wanted to minimize the suffering of other people
and work together.
Yes, you benefit from morality. So why should you not go rob somebody? I don't know, because you have air conditioning. That's why. Yeah. You want to live in a world where you have air conditioning, right? Then don't go rob people.
It is interesting. So with the whole COVID thing, and you think about, like, you know, we watch these movies in Hollywood, like The Purge or Contagion.
Mm-hmm.
Contagion was a good movie. Like, the second a virus got out in Contagion, the world went to shit. Like, everybody, people were robbing banks, you know, people were breaking down houses, they're shooting each other. And I mean, we've had a pretty tumultuous year with the riots and protests, with all the things going on with COVID. And it does seem like we want to maintain our utility, you know, maintain our sense. So, but you still have, like, so when I'm looking at somebody and we're having a debate about something, so, you know, you have an opinion and I have an opinion and I'm trying to change your mind on an opinion. What am I, you know, like, what am I actually doing there? Am I just trying to change the chemicals in your brain to accept my viewpoint? When we get a deconversion, like a genuine deconversion, what is happening? Like, can I be, obviously you would believe I was predetermined to deconvert, you know, like the series.
Right. And the same goes for the person who doesn't deconvert. So if somebody's cognitive bias is so strong that nothing ever gets through to them because they themselves do not think about it, then it's also already determined.
Yeah. So I guess it's kind of hard. There's that part in the Matrix movie where they ask him, like, you know, why didn't you know, do this? And he said, well, I don't like the idea that I'm not in control of my life. And I think that's a hard thing to grasp. That
it is. No, like, when you first realize, you're like, okay, that this is complicated. I'm not entirely in control of myself. But I think, like, honestly, after maybe a year of not believing in free will, what I can say is you still feel like you have free will. You still have this illusion of free will. That isn't taken away from you by accepting the fact that you don't actually have it. You still get to live with the illusion of it. So the same way a person who does psychedelics knows that things aren't moving, but they enjoy it, you can enjoy your illusion of being in control of your decisions, even though it's not real.
I had a conversation with J Mike. J Mike was who turned me on to the determinism and put me down that path. And this was probably, you know, 6-8 months ago.
Right.
And I remember after having a long discussion with people about determinism and thinking about it myself, and I was leaving my kitchen and there was a paper towel roll that needed to be replaced. And I was trying to do some sort of gymnastics in my head to do the opposite of what I was determined to do, either replacing the paper towel roll or not replacing the paper towel roll.
Yeah.
And
but you made that decision to try to not do that, and you could not have acted out.
I can't. It's a lose-lose. There's no way around it, you know? So I think the illusion of free will necessary, but it is just that.
But it's also pretty fascinating to think that a bunch of atoms within the universe moved in such a way that they were able to figure out that they were nothing other than atoms. I mean, like, we are the universe experiencing itself and it making its own decisions. Like, we're the sensory organs of the universe, and that's honestly just fucking incredible. So
that's it. And it's a very it makes you feel very small, but at the same time a part of something bigger, you know, that universal experience that we all have or have the same makeup. It also kind of should be an adjoining thing where we kind of work together because we know that the situation we're in. That is, it's nuts. Thinking about that. And sometimes I can feel it happening, you know, like sometimes, you know, you can feel those processes in your brain going on. Or at least you're aware of them now. It doesn't stop them from happening, but it is pretty interesting. And also some of the thoughts, experiments that you see around thought and them being able to map things in your brain and understand how you're going to make decisions about things. So
I mean,
about that?
I think so. On to what you were just saying, we've actually been able to show, and this is something that actually really shocked me because I don't fully understand it. But what we know about the human brain is that if somebody has a disorder in which they're unable to experience emotions, they actually experience this inability to make decisions. And you would think, like, why would somebody not have emotions stop their decision from like eating breakfast? That's hunger. But believe it or not, if somebody isn't able to experience emotions, or even if they are experiencing them just not on the level that a normal person is, then I would actually say, or I shouldn't say normal person, but the average brain, whether it be neurotypical or neurodivergent, if somebody's not experiencing emotions, then they need help making decisions to eat, to live. So the fact that the person who has that happen to their brain can't act out of accordance with that, I think makes the case for itself. I mean, your emotions are going to determine your decisions.
Yeah.
And you might think, okay, I was angry and I wanted to do something. Say you're a person who has never laid a hand on your spouse, but you felt a desire to do it. But you were a person who didn't do it. Because I haven't experienced that desire in my relationship. But if somebody experienced the desire to hit their spouse and they opted to not do that, they would think, well, there's your evidence of free will. I felt like doing it and I didn't do it. But the reality is that their desire to have a healthy relationship and to not lose that person was stronger than their desire to hit that person. So what they had was conflicting desires. And what they did is they acted in accordance with the one that they desired the most.
Well, that's, I think we're going to move because somebody is just like really about it and I don't want to get hurt. So let's go ahead and move on to Murdershed.
Hey, how's it going?
Hey, pretty good. How's it going, man?
Shane, welcome to the show.
Thank you.
I had a couple of questions because we were talking about obviously I'm in the same camp as you as far as I'm a hard determinist for sure.
Okay.
But I also believe in an objective morality.
Okay.
So if you're willing to take a quick left turn and talk about morality for a minute.
Yeah, I'm willing to do that. That's honestly ethics and morality is like one of my favorite topics within philosophy. It's almost harder for me to decide, like, what do I like more between the free will and determinism topic and the, morality? Is it objective or subjective topic? So yeah, I'm very interested. What are some questions you have about my views on morality?
Sure. So do you believe in a subjective morality, right?
Yes.
That essentially we have moral codes within societies and societies get to decide moral codes?
No, so that's moral relativism, and there's a distinction between moral relativism and moral subjectivism. Are you familiar with that distinction?
No.
Okay, so in the branches of moral philosophy, you have moral realism and moral anti-realism. So moral realism is the idea that there are objective facts, there are objective truths. I'm sorry, that there are moral facts is what I meant to say. So sure. Moral realism is this idea that there are moral facts, and moral anti-realism is this idea that there are not moral facts. So under moral realism, that as the umbrella, you have underneath that, you have moral objectivism. And then when it comes to moral anti-realism, you have moral subjectivism and I hope I'm not getting it wrong. Yeah, moral subjectivism and moral relativism. So the idea of moral relativism is this idea that a society dictates what morality is. So in this country, it's okay to female genital mutilation. Since it's accepted by that society, it's fine. But then for us, it's wrong, and that would be inconsistent. So I don't believe in moral relativism in that perspective. So what I mean with subjective morality is morals are something that we have based on our own judgments and values. Now, judgments and values are caused by our brain. And in philosophy, when we say that something is subjective, what we mean is that its existence is dependent on minds,
correct,
either causing or interpreting it.
Yep.
So if you wanted to prove to me that objective morality exists, all it would take was you would have to be able to give me an example of something which was not conscious creating a moral or immoral action.
Okay.
And you'll realize that you can't do it. We don't assign morality to things that are not conscious.
Now,
So
actually, if you don't mind, so I've been playing around with, to answer that question, actually, whether or not inanimate objects can be moral or immoral. So essentially, I have been really interested in a objective morality. Do you know who T-Jump is?
yes.
I have been really interested in his model. Have you been watching his videos on morality at all?
I haven't. I have heard that he's a moral objectivist.
Yes. So here's the breakdown, right? So essentially, from his position, he is trying to figure out what would be the best of all possible worlds. What is the ultimate goal that we could possibly be moving towards, right?
Mm-hmm.
And in his model, or the model that he presents, it would be eliminating any and all imposition of free will, or I'm sorry, not free will, imposition of will. So if somebody doesn't want you to do something to you, it wouldn't happen. If I want to be able to fly, I could fly. And any imposition of will includes things, and he says, a lot of times when he talks about it, that eventually, if people adopt this model, they will view something like a rock falling on a person as an immoral action. Even though that rock had no agency, it was still an imposition of that person's will. And in the best of all possible worlds, that person's will wouldn't have been imposed upon by that rock.
Right. So I would disagree, because I think that something conscious has to commit the act in order for it to be assigned morality. I feel like it's removing the word morality from its essence to assign it to things that aren't conscious. Now, we can say that these are bad things that happened, but we're not talking about bad in the sense of immoral.
I think the difference is whether or not an action is immoral, or whether or not intentions are immoral, right?
Okay.
So
yeah.
An immoral action would be the imposition of somebody's will. It doesn't matter if it's a car running over somebody. It doesn't matter if it's a rock falling on something. That is an immoral action because it imposes on that person's will, or that.
Yeah, but I feel that it has to be willed. Like, I feel like it having a will to do that is a requirement, and I don't see how we get away from that.
Well, and that would be the difference between an immoral action and an immoral intent.
Right. So, in terms of objective truth being involved in subjective morality, because that's an important thing to establish, is that it is objectively true that if you throw acid in my face, it causes suffering, right?
Sure.
So if we have this subjective assumption that we ought not do that which causes suffering.
Yep.
Now, if we agree on that, and so premise 1, we ought not do that which causes suffering. Premise 2, throwing acid in my face will cause me to suffer. Conclusion, therefore, you ought not throw acid in my face. Right. Now, there's that objective truth in there, but we have to inject that subjective assumption of we ought not do that which causes suffering. Now, suffering is dependent on the existence of mind in itself. And so I think that makes sense. I would have to look more into T-Jump's videos on inanimate objects being assigned morality, because I'm in disagreement with that for sure.
And I don't present it nearly as well as he can, obviously.
Okay.
Right? So I highly recommend checking that out.
Right. But if things are,
I do feel like I'm tracking you, because I've kind of been juggling between the two.
Right.
So I presented what I kind of like right now, but the kind of subjective goal, right, with objective ways to reach that goal.
Yes, there are objective ways to reach our subjective goals.
Correct.
But because of the fact that we cannot have the achievement of these goals without subjectivity, morality itself cannot be objective.
Right. And then,
So-
but it's one of those things where in a determinist world, does a subjective morality even make sense? Because we would be determined to view that subjective goal as our goal, right?
Yeah.
So in a way, it would be objective because there would be no other way for us to view it, right?
Well, no, it's objective in that it's in accordance with that goal. So minds exist objectively since minds exist within the material world. However, in philosophy, when something is caused by a mind, this is when it suits the definition of subjectivity. So
right, and can be changed with the change of a mind. Basically, like
right.
I think it's funny because typically you hear theists say that morality is objective based on their God's will, but it's their God's mind.
Right. So he's
subjective mind.
Right. It's like
objectively changing morality as he goes.
Right. He subjectively changes what the objective moral code is. It's like, I don't think you're really thinking about this.
So from a philosophical standpoint, technically, if you believe in a theistic morality, you believe in subjective morality.
It's even more subjective than my own. And I would also say that when it comes to a theistic worldview, I feel like free will is harder to justify if you believe in a God than it is if you don't believe in a God. I mean, I feel like you not believing in a God, if you're somebody who doesn't know what determinism is, you have two people who don't know what determinism is, one's theist, one's atheist, it would totally make sense for the theist to believe in free will. In determinism. Yeah, because he was, and this is actually an interesting thing. If you've ever looked into there is, I would say, the only philosophically consistent Christian theology. And when I say it's philosophically consistent, keep in mind what I mean is that it's deductive, not that it's sound. So I disagree with some premises, but I believe that it's deductive in that Calvinists, unless I am mistaken, and I've looked into it a lot, Calvinists believe that everything is predetermined by God. And it seems that they accept that it follows from that there isn't really any free will. And I believe that, if there's a God and God has decided everything that's going to happen, then yes, it's even more evident that there's no free will.
So they have, the ones that we've talked to anyway, have kind of a mixed bag where they believe that everything is predetermined by God, but you can go against his will with your will.
Right.
And, that's what gets you in trouble.
Yeah. So the problem with that is as soon as they say that you are able to act out of accordance with God's will, is they're throwing away omnipotence. And if they're arguing for the Christian God, then they're required to argue for an omnipotent being. Now, what you have some people try to do is they try to redefine omnipotence. And some people, I had somebody accuse me of simplifying the definition for saying that omnipotence is being all powerful and having the ability to do anything. So the definition that I was accused of simplifying, I gave verbatim, word for word, the entire Oxford definition. And the Christians saw me define it and said, "You're simplifying the definition." I'm like, no, I'm not. That's what omnipotence is. So they try to change it from all powerful to maximally powerful and try to make a distinction there. But the problem is you are arguing for a God who's supposed to be all powerful and is supposed to have, by that definition, the ability to do anything.
Well, and there's just too many paradoxes within all powerful as it is.
Right. Can God microwave a burrito so hot that he couldn't eat it? Right. Like all of these, and those, apologists get really frustrated. Like to them, it's the simplest, like almost just the dumbest thing you could ask when you go like, could God create a rock so heavy that he couldn't lift it? But you can be irritated by it because it's common, but it doesn't change the fact that it's a paradox that proves the point. That
can't be solved.
Yeah, you either have a God who couldn't create the rock heavy enough, or you have a God who could create it and couldn't lift it. So,
right. Well, thanks for chatting morality with me for a minute.
Of course,
that was pretty sweet. I've been I'm really into these two topics right now. So
yes.
But we are going to move along. I think we're going to bring Oz in here in a little bit.
Okay.
As soon as he's ready to go.
And I would also want to mention, if you're looking into making sense of morality and happiness and all that, from a perspective of there not being any free will, look into optimistic nihilism. I'm an optimistic nihilist. And a lot of people hear that and they're like, what did you just say? Optimistic nihilism? I've actually come to find that nihilism is one of the most optimistic philosophies that there is. And I think that if you do a little research in that, you'll see what I mean about it'll solve a lot of your questions about
learning that nothing really matters in the big scheme of things grants a lot of freedom.
Well, right. So the fact that we're born into a life that does not already have meaning means that we get to dictate what that meaning is. The universe having no principles means that the only principles relevant are the ones that we decide on. And the universe having no purpose, again, means we get to dictate what its purpose is. And that's so much more freeing than walking into a life that actually already has a meaning. Like, here's the meaning of life. You're a janitor. Fuck me. I don't want to do that.
Well, to each their own.
Right.
I actually kind of like dirty jobs. So I wanted to, are you on any social media or anything? Is there any place that people can find you?
Yes, they could find my page on Facebook if you look up Shane the if you look up Shane the Skeptic, as is on the screen.
Shane the Spectacle.
Shane the Spectacle. Yeah, you look up Shane the Skeptic, you'll find me on Facebook. If you look up Shane the Skeptic on YouTube without any spaces, my channel should come right up. And if you just search Shane Isgrig, then a lot of other podcasts, other debates, things like that will come up as well. So that's where to find me.
And
I should also mention I have a Twitter at Shane Isgrig, but I don't care about Twitter. So if you follow me, thanks, but I don't care.
I'll tell you what, I'm really bad about Twitter too. So let's follow each other and be bad about it together.
Yep, let's follow each other and both never tweet anything.
Yeah, that's about it.
Yep.
All right. Well, we'll move it along.
What's up, Shane?
What's going on, man? How you doing?
Feeling good. So
right.
Great conversation so far. I did take a couple notes what we were talking about even backstage before we started. So I want to make sure we jump in a couple of those. And first thing, and we don't have to spend too much time on this, but the one thing for me, as I've went through this process with going from free will to determinism, being a Christian for 30 plus years, was trying to I guess strip away the convenience of feeling like I had a choice.
Yeah.
And as I've shared with you, in our messaging and things like that, just in a few minutes, is there any anything that you could offer somebody that's kind of going through that and trying to discard or I guess take those guards down, those walls down from that false thought, that illusion?
Sure. So it's important to remember that, like I said earlier, you still get to experience your illusion of it. But also now maybe take a little more time to understand why people say that it's the case that we are, as a social species, evolved to be moral. And you might find that you have a little bit more reason now to be a moral person than you did before. And now that you can understand that, you desire pleasure or, well-being is... Some people associate the word pleasure with sexuality, and it's almost weird that I don't, because I'm a pretty kinky person, but when I do philosophy, so when I say pleasure, I just think like well-being and pleasure in the philosophical sense. So we know that suffering minimizes pleasure, and we want to live in a world where there's more pleasure. We could reason out why maximizing pleasure in the world that we live in maximizes the pleasure that we get to experience, especially when you realize, the simple things like I described earlier, that you realize that when you go do a thing that is moral, you feel good about yourself. Well, you now have a reason to go do that thing. And if you want to go, but why do I feel good about myself? Okay, go figure that out all you want, but go do it first. If you know that you derive pleasure from living a virtuous lifestyle, which we can prove from our evolutionary psychology. now that we know that you are evolved in such a way that you derive pleasure from living a virtuous lifestyle, go do that. Go be a good person. That's my answer to you.
Okay, fair enough. And like I said, that's one of those where you ask for the short answers on some of those because they could go forever. Because the one I do want to make sure that we talk about before we go to Q&A that again you brought up backstage was the compatibility.
Yes.
And I when you said that I had yet to hear it the way I think you were presenting it.
Right. So I'm glad that I got the opportunity to do that, to bring this up, because I think it's a very important thing to frame in this discussion. So before you're going to figure out, now I want everybody who's listened, whether you're a determinist or you believe in free will, to listen and really consider everything that you've heard tonight. Now, I'm sorry. What was the question you just asked me? I got distracted.
No, just the what is you brought up backstage the compatibility.
The compatibility and incompatibilism. I'm sorry, I have a dog.
You're good.
Anyway, so before you're going to figure out whether free will and determinism, whether you believe in free will or you believe in determinism, the first thing that I think you ought to do is figure out whether or not free will and determinism are compatible. So if you're somebody who does not believe that free will and determinism are compatible, you're what's known as an incompatibilist. Now, if you're somebody who believes in if you're somebody who takes the incompatibilist view, so you have two choices, because if incompatibilism is true, then it logically follows that one of two theses can be correct. Either we do have free will in the philosophically significant sense, and determinism is not true. And this view is called libertarianism. So know that in the subject of free will, when you hear the word libertarian, it has nothing to do with political libertarianism. Libertarianism is the idea that we have free will and determinism is false. Now, the other proposition, of course, is that everything within the universe is determined by causation within the natural world. And it follows from that there is no free will. So while you might look at the libertarians and the determinists as these are the opposite perspectives, one believes there's free will, one believes there isn't. They do agree on the conceptual point that these things are not compatible. And in one hand, that almost makes them, more closely related than somebody who's a compatibilist. So it's actually an interesting question. What is the opposite of my position as a hard determinist? Is the opposite position to be a libertarian, because then you would agree with me on incompatibilism? Or is the opposite of my position a compatibilist view? And there's one thing that's really important to note about compatibilism. This is something that I saw Cosmic Skeptic get wrong in his recent video about compatibilism. And his content's great. I would still recommend going and watching it. But he said that compatibilism assumes that determinism is true. This is not actually the case. Compatibilism is simply the belief that determinism and free will are compatible. So a person could be a compatibilist and not believe in determinism for reasons to do with arguments involving quantum physics. And I'm not a quantum physicist, but when I've looked at the work that these people make, I accept the findings of quantum physics. I do not deny the findings of it. The problem is I don't understand the premise that is missing between here are the findings, insert premise here, therefore you have free will. So I remain unconvinced that there's any free will. But a lot of arguments that have to do with free will and compatibilism are involved in quantum physics and quantum mechanics. And if you're somebody who is interested, I would recommend looking into that subject as well.
Okay. And when you're just to refresh my memory, the very first part there, you said that if you see that the determinism and the free will are not compatible, then you're incompatibilist, right?
Incompatibilist, yes. Okay.
So
and that hard determinists and libertarians are both incompatibilists. Now, if you're somebody, the point that I didn't get to yet was if you're somebody who is a compatibilist and you believe in determinism, then you're what's called a soft determinist. So a soft determinist is a compatibilist who accepts determinism, and a hard determinist is an incompatibilist who accepts determinism.
Okay. Okay, and I'm gonna make a quick break here just so everybody knows in the chat. First of all, everybody that's been hanging out with us, thank you very much. Here in a few, we're gonna get to Q&A with Murdershed Steve. So start throwing those questions in the chat. And I saw tons of good ones earlier. I think it was when Ben and Shane were talking. So if you ask those, re-ask them if you need to, because they do disappear within StreamYard, our streaming system, after a certain amount of time. Or if you super chat, that will put everything right up to the top and make sure that you get asked. And we all know here at the Atheist Roundtable, super chats silence Pastor John. So let's keep silencing Pastor John. We'll do that. But so we, all right. So in that, I had a question before I went to talk about the questions or the Q&A. I guess the one thing that I hear from, I was listening to a debate today from between a Christian and Dan Barker, which is he's a determinist, and some of the things from the Christian side that they bring up is that now obviously that they have to presuppose their God into this for a lot of argument. But they bring up well, then if determinism is true, can we still punish people since they were already quote unquote programmed to act in such a way? What's your argument there?
My response is that yes, because doing so minimizes suffering and creates a better world, and we want to live in a world where there is less suffering. So we have a philosophical justification for jailing people that has nothing to do with free will, so we stick with it.
Okay.
So yeah, whether that person, if somebody went and killed a bunch of people, it wouldn't be rational for us to just let them go keep doing that. Now, we're going to decide to jail them, and our reason for that is we desire to live in a world where people aren't going around killing everyone. But we can't choose the fact that we desire to live in a world where people aren't going around killing everyone. But since we know we desire to live in a world where people aren't getting away with murder, we have a philosophical justification for jailing murderers.
Right. And one of the other interesting things that I've, because like I told you, when you and I first started a discussion on you coming on to the show and talking about this, is I was still, and I still am, to be honest, but like I said, I'm like 90% there, and
yeah,
I think it's still some of the old free will brainwashing that I received for 30 something years.
Yeah.
It does, the illusion does feel good to think that, oh, I did make this choice. I did do this,
Yeah. Well, I would actually go as far as saying we can say that you're free to act in accordance with your will. The problem is that you do not get to decide your will. So your will's determined, but it already is your will. So once you get so once you realize that, you're like, okay, it's not like, oh, I wish I had chocolate ice cream, but my body just picked vanilla instead. Like, no, you're going to act in accordance with the one that you desire more. So yeah, you can't act out of accordance with your will, but I mean, if you have your will and you're acting in accordance with that, like, yeah, you can't control what your will is, but since you have it and you derive pleasure from doing the things that, acting in accordance with your will, you're going to keep doing it. So life continues the same. I understand, like, it's a very big thing to realize, like, whoa, no free will. Like, it's not one of those small things that you walk away from. Like, you stop and think about it. Because I'm going to tell you, this might make you laugh. I'm going to tell you the first thing that I thought about when I became a determinist, and this really fucked with my head. This is my thought. You ready?
Yep.
All sex is rape. That's what I thought, because if my understanding of consent is a person choosing to have sex with someone, right? But if there's no such thing as choice, then no one's ever chosen to have sex before, and therefore all the sex that's ever happened was rape. Now, I don't actually think this now, but this was a thought that I had, and I was like, I don't know if I want other people to know that there's no free will, because then they might justify doing bad things by saying rape is no different from sex. But no, what we realize is that a person is going to act in accordance with a will that they are determined. Their will's determined, but they're going to act in accordance with it. So if a person does not will to have sex with you, then they will say no. And if a person says no when a person proceeds to do something sexual to them, then they're violating that person. And we can justify that without a belief in free will. But that was one of my first thoughts. And I'm not going to lie, like when it comes to morality, it will really mess with you trying to make sense of morality without free will. But always remember this, just because it's harder to make sense of morality without a belief in free will, it does not mean that free will must exist. Mm-hmm. Just because it sucks if there's no free will doesn't mean there must be free will. Sometimes things that suck are true. And what I've come to find is it doesn't suck as much as you think it does. Just like I found that out with nihilism. I used to think nihilism was this idea that you personally said nothing mattered, like to you. But no, nihilism is more things don't matter intrinsically, and we assign what value is. So,
yeah. Oh, that's a whole nother one. That's another one I've been in the little bit of downtime that I get been studying, which is a whole nother compartment all by itself. But when you start breaking these things and see, I always try to, when I'm studying and now like talking to you or, when I talk to other people about this, I always try to keep in mind those that are still, wired or programmed the way I was.
Yeah.
And how do we get to where I can effectively communicate this to those that do still believe in free will, but not even that, but even the word free will is not in the Bible, but it alludes to
right
what they're talking about. And I'll say this, and I have one more question before we do Q&A, because you made a claim backstage, and I'm gonna put your feet to the fire.
Yes.
So when we're having that or attempting to have that discussion with people that are still of that mindset, I kind of asked you this up top, but now that we've kind of walked through a little more, what is the most simplistic, without using without using the big words and the complicated phrasing, what is the most simplistic way that we could tell this to somebody that doesn't know what determinism is, period?
I would say, because one time I changed my friend Skylar's mind about it in less than 5 minutes. And when I did that, I realized I need to talk about the subject more, because that almost never happens. Now, not everybody's like him where they think about it, but he started with like, oh, you don't think there's free will? Elaborate. And then he was like, holy shit. So what I explained to him was that he was unable to act out of accordance with the chemicals and the neurons that are operating within his brain. Now, the same way the atoms from water that have evaporated are already going to fall when, they become heavy enough to fall into gravity. They're already going to combine. It's already going to happen. For that same reason, that same way, what you're going to do after I finish this sentence, or 5 minutes from now or tomorrow, is already determined to happen, because your brain, the thing that is causing your choices, is a material thing. And these neurons are operating in the way that they're operating, and these chemicals are where they are in a way that's going to determine your decisions. And you don't get to simply have a different, have your neurons operate differently, have the chemicals. Like, you would have to be in complete control of your brain in order for you to be able to have free will. Mm-hmm. And the reality is you're simply not. If you are angry, you might be able to not do things that your anger makes you slightly desire to do. And again, that's because of your desire to be virtuous, being stronger than that desire. But you cannot act out of accordance with the fact that you're angry. You cannot be uninfluenced by your emotions. You don't necessarily get to decide what your emotions are. And I think most people can understand that. Like, if you are sad, like, yes, there's something you can do to like make healthy steps to think happier thoughts, but like at some point you do not get to choose to never be sad again. Otherwise you would have just chose that, right? Yep. So because you're unable to act uninfluenced from your psychology, your actions are determined. And if your actions are determined by things that you're not in control of, then you don't have free will. And I would hope that that would be a simple enough way for somebody to understand. But,
I think like I said, at a ground level, it's somebody that just doesn't know what it is.
Mhm.
I think that's a simple way of putting it. So I'm going to say this, and then I have the big question here for Shane. But guys, one last time, get your questions in there for Shane, for any of the TART team. We'll be happy to answer those here in a minute. But Shane, I'm gonna ask this, and I'm gonna put you up big on the screen because this is the one where I think this is where you got to pull out all the punches, right? So, Shane said backstage when we were talking that he acknowledges that he is taking on the burden of proof.
Yes.
And as you know, an atheist, we always talk about when we're talking about theists, that the theist has the burden of proof. Obviously, they're making the God claim, and Shane is now taking on the burden of proof by making his assertion, which I'll let him make his assertions. That way I'm not misrepresenting him. But he's saying there is a thing, and he believes this thing is true. So Shane, take as long as you need. The floor is yours, but the burden of proof is yours when it comes to determinism. Get him.
Yep. So he is correct. I did make it clear before I did started this podcast that I'm making a claim, so I have a burden of proof. So as opposed to my atheism, where I don't claim I know there is no God, I simply don't believe that there is one. I can't know when I don't have any reasons to believe. When it comes to the subject of determinism, I'm actually making the claim that I know that there is no free will. And when you make the claim that you know something doesn't exist, what you're doing is you're giving yourself a burden of proof. And my goal has been to meet that burden throughout tonight. And if I haven't already, let me try to do it now. So if your actions and your choices are determined by things which you are not in control of, then you do not have free will. Now, your actions and your choices are caused by your brain, a material thing which you do not have control of the makeup of. The Big Bang could have happened slightly differently. You would have had different neurons, different chemicals in your brain. You would have acted differently. Now, free will would be the ability to act differently, and we can reason out why you do not have that because of the fact that you can't act out of accordance with your psychology. So since you can't act out of accordance with these external influences and the internal causation of your brain, we can say that you don't have free will. And the reason for that is a belief in free will, this ability to do anything or choose to do anything, would be choosing what your will is. So you would be able to choose to have a different will. Now, you can know something's good for you, and you can't necessarily make yourself will it. You can act in accordance with your will, as I stated earlier, but we still get this illusion of free will. And that is honestly, I think, fulfilling enough. Now, a lot of people want to make claims about morality and say, it's like I've said before, some people think that there's no morality if there's no free will. And while I disagree with that premise, I would say that even if it's true that we cannot justify morality without belief in free will, then tough. It doesn't mean that therefore there must be free will. So since we know that choices are caused by the brain, and we can prove this to be the case. And I'm not a psychologist or a neurologist, so you can look more into that. But I would hope that people aren't denying my premise that the chemicals and neurons in your brain are what determine your actions and your choices. And you're not in control of this cause, therefore you're not in control of its effect. It would be inconsistent for us to say that we are in control of the effect of something when we're not in control of its cause. And I hope that that's a good way of making my case.
Okay, and when we get into Q&A, we will let the viewers and the audience decide how they feel and get them involved in the conversation. Yeah. And I know there's a couple points: the compatibility, the burden of proof you want to talk about before we go into the Q&A. Shane, is there anything I want to make sure we respect your time? Is there anything else that you wanted to make sure you hitting those points?
No, I think I hit like all of the points that I wanted to make. The fact that you can be a compatibilist without being a determinist. But if you're a compatibilist and you're a determinist, you're a soft determinist. If you are, so again, libertarians, the people who believe in free will, hard determinists, the people who say determinism is true, there is no free will, agree on the conceptual point that free will and determinism are incompatible. And that's an important thing to look at before you look at the rest of the discussion is before you go, do I believe in determinism? Do I believe in free will? Start with, do I believe determinism and free will are compatible, and reason your way out from there.
Okay, perfect. Oh, that's usually a sign Murdershed's on his way. But we did have one super chat while you were talking there, Shane. So I'll make sure we pull it up here. People are products of their environment and programming, true, but the idea of determinism seems to squelch the desire to stretch beyond the label assigned to them. Any comments on that from you, Shane?
Okay, so I definitely want to respect the question, especially considering it's a super chat. So I'm going to try to like interpret it better. So he's agreeing with me that people are products of their environment and programming. He says, but the idea of determinism seems to squelch the desire to stretch beyond the label assigned to them. So it's not only people being products of their environment and programming, or I guess it is. It's the inability to act out of accordance with them. And it's more of a comment than it is a question, because he's saying it seems to squelch the desire to stretch beyond the label assigned to them.
Right. I guess in me reading it several times, would you say yay or nay to that? Do you agree or disagree?
I disagree that it's squelches the desire to stretch beyond the label assigned to them.
Okay. And why would you disagree?
That's a good question. So why do I disagree? Part of it is that I don't necessarily understand why it would. So why does people's choices being determined by causation squelch the desire to stretch beyond the label assigned to them? I don't know why he thinks that. So I don't know why he thinks it, but I disagree with it.
Okay, fair enough. What I'll say, Wittershen's, and thank you. Always in our comments and supporting the channel. If you want to, the last part of that, if you want to attach a question to that and put it up, we'll make sure Murdershed Steve gets to that here in a second. But let me pull that down here. And just a quick thank you to everybody in the chat. Let me scroll down here. Oh, as soon as I do it, T Jump's in the house. What's up, T Jump?
T Jump and I recently both debated the same apologist. Him and I should have a dialogue about what it was like to talk with that guy.
Yeah, and and if you guys want to get a debate or a conversation, whatever, T Jump knows we love to host those here. We can get something, not between you guys, but if like a 2-on-2 or something like that, that'd be for sure. That'd be fun. But T Jump, Wittershen's already had the username up there. Megan, Charlie Wood Chips, gosh, keep scrolling here. Atheist Chico, as always. And I'm sure I'm going to miss people. Ian, always here supporting. Appreciate you guys. Murdershed Steve, we already know you're here. Cool. But yeah, we'll get to it now. The one question I do have for you, Shane, and this one's probably the most serious question that I'm going to ask tonight. Have you ever been inside of a murder shed before?
I have not.
Oh, how's it going, everybody? Just getting a little work done. So I saw T Jump in the comments there. I think maybe his ears must be burning. How's it going, everybody?
How's it going?
Ben
What's
Jane?
up?
Ben G, I feel like I haven't seen you in a forks night.
It's been a couple weeks. Yeah, it's been a busy couple weeks for sure.
A couple of forks.
A couple of forks, a couple of knives. Dig in there, yeah.
Oh, dig in.
Ooh.
Quite literally.
So that's sweet meat.
So I've got a question here right at the top from Velocilobster. Now, at this point, I am thoroughly convinced that this guy's an asshole, but I love this question. and I actually agree with it. Do you believe that rehabilitation would be more beneficial overall to punishment, especially from a determinist viewpoint?
That's an easy question, and my answer is yes. I mean, I wish I could elaborate beyond that, but yeah, it's pretty simple. Yes. I mean, punishing, I guess, is better than nothing in a sense. Well, it depends. Our system kind of makes people worse than they are and releases them. So that's not really helpful. But detaining people makes sense. But while they're detained in other countries and other prisons, we tend to see them being educated and rehabilitated. And I think that would be a lot better than what we have in the US. So I will fully agree. Yes to that.
Beautiful. And although we both agree to that, I feel like Velocilobster deserves all the punishment that we can throw at him. So
we'll make one exception.
One exception for Velocilobster.
Just that guy. That guy gets to be punished. Everyone else rehabilitated.
And it's absolutely, even from my objective standpoint and your subjective standpoint of morality, in both ways, it is very morally acceptable to do so because he's got to come.
Yeah, I'm sure the evangelicals will love that. Maybe we could just get a clip of that, send it to InfoWars or I don't know, somebody.
Oh yeah, old Jonesy boy.
Yeah.
Megan had a question, and I'm not sure if it was necessarily directed towards us, but I'm going to use it. If our will were truly free, we forced against our will to conform to the laws of physics?
Okay.
And
So
I think this question was directed towards my objective morality as well as your subjective morality discussion.
yeah. So I think what she's saying is if our will is truly free, are we forced against our will to conform to the laws of physics? And I guess I would have to say yes, because in order for you to have free will, I think you would have to change something within the laws of physics. If things within the physical world are determining the process of your brain, then yeah, I think you would have to act out of accordance with that. You'd have to break those laws of physics to have free will.
And I would take that a step further and say physics itself is immoral in this way.
Okay.
But you and T-Jump should talk about that.
Yeah, I don't know exactly how to respond to physics is immoral. I'm just gonna say okay. I don't know that I agree with it, but okay. I'll think about that before I make any conclusions.
Shane,
That is the best answer that you could ever give.
Shane, when we deal with Murdershed Steve, that's typically the answer. Okay.
Okay. that seems about right.
Let's just say that in some occasions it may not be beneficial for you to say anything otherwise.
Okay.
He's catching on.
Yeah, I think if asked if I've ever been in a murder shed, well, I might. You know what? I'm just not going to answer the question because a lack of an answer is evidence of nothing. Yeah, so I've never been in
that hoard up in a court of law.
I plead the fifth.
Fair enough. Atheist Chico has a question. Keep them hands up, Oz. The word free, in your opinion, is that a thing that actually exists in reality other than a concept?
Well, there are different concepts of freedom, but I think the concept that I have of freedom in relation to the discussion of, will, I would say no. I don't think. All right, sorry, we don't. Yeah. How exactly was it worded again? Can you pull the question back up, or is it?
Yep.
Okay.
In your opinion, the word free.
Oh, does it exist other than a concept? No, it's only a concept.
I was about to say, there's a ton of different forms of freedom. Like America is a free country. I'm allowed to do what I want within a framework.
Yeah. I mean, obviously we have some form of freedom, which has been more restricted since the pandemic. So there is some definition, like the government couldn't do something to make you have less free will, but they can impose on your freedom for justifications like a pandemic. So certain things that you define as freedoms like might be able to be taken away from you. But in relation to will, I think free is just a concept.
So like certain freedoms can be taken away, but it would be justifiable.
Yeah, no, I definitely think some freedoms being taken away obviously are justifiable.
Like I just realized freedom's kind of like a scale. You can just have things that make you more or less free, even if it wasn't bound by any laws. And I brought up this example earlier. I still wouldn't be able to speak French just because I wanted to. So I'm at some level, my freedom is limited. If
Well, I mean,
it was existed anyway.
Benji, you could speak French if you put in the work.
Oh
Yeah, but I think that's a better argument against. I don't know, because a person could of course turn around and argue that, well, you could learn to speak French. Like we have examples of people doing it, so it's possible to do it. And you know, what you're saying is you're unable to speak French because you're unable to speak in accordance with having this knowledge that you don't actually have. But I don't think like lacking knowledge is a really good argument against free will, because somebody could say you might will to speak French, but you weren't able to do it simply because you didn't have the knowledge necessary to do so. And that might be separate from will.
It's interesting because I think about that as a point for determinism, because like only after you've input certain experiences can you speak French. That's what learning is.
Right.
Inputting experiences into a flesh computer.
Well,
Yeah.
and that actually brings up a very good point about determinism that I like to bring up. Because a lot of people think that they have choices and that they make those choices based on, but you're making those choices based on influences that you've had throughout your life, right?
Yeah.
So I might have an emotion like anger, and had I not been taught how to manage that emotion and react differently than what maybe my instinctual reaction would be, I would just act on it, right?
Mhm.
But because I was predetermined by being given the knowledge that I can choose a different way of acting, right?
Mhm.
It's still determined.
Right.
Because without that knowledge, I would have just acted.
Yeah.
Bingo, bango. Free
Bingo,
will
bango.
doesn't exist.
Hey, I think
Right.
Chico had another question for Shane.
Oh,
I got your back, dog.
down at the bottom?
Yep.
From the bottom to the top.
I don't
So
think
from the
it's-
bottom, now we're here.
That's a
Oh, there it is.
comment.
Well, and I do actually have another question for me, so I can field that one after this one. Question for Shane again. Do you agree that the closest thing to achieving free will is understanding / realizing we are determined?
That's a very good question. The closest thing to achieving free will, accepting that we don't have it. I think probably yes, but I'm not confident enough in my answer to say like a solid yes. So I'm going to go with a probably yes on that one.
You might could say it's the closest thing that we can get to freedom is realizing that.
Sure.
Maybe.
Yeah, you're set free by the realization that you are determined in a sense. So you can grant that.
Maybe. I've got one question here for me, and I'm going to selfishly field it. How many sheds can a murder shed Steve if a murder shed could shed Steves? And there is actually a question that all murder shed Steves would agree to, and it is 31.
Huh.
Yeah. It's been heavily studied, actually, by the
I
murder
don't know
shed
why
Steve
I was
community.
thinking 7.
Because you were predetermined by... Like
That is true.
if I tell you to pick a number between 1 and 7, or between 1 and 10, you're probably gonna pick 7 or 3, right? Something like that. Or 1 and 5, it's 3. 1 and 10, it's 7. 80% of the time, right? Something like that. Basic psychology stuff. Boring.
I love it.
And I love it.
The
I've got-
jumpster.
Yeah, I
had
was going to say, T-Jump just threw a question in here. If we are determined, how is our action any different from a determined rock falling and killing someone?
Well, because if you have, so another way that it's been put forward is if you have like 2 clumps of atoms and you like one clump of atoms is deliberately going to cause harm to somebody and one can cause harm to somebody, we can justify why we would I guess I would use the word detain somebody, and I would agree with the rehabilitation point. Detain somebody who we know, while we don't believe in a free will, we do see intent. So if they do intend to do things like this, then we reason out their character. The same way, if you meet somebody, you have some idea of the types of things they would or would not do based on your understanding of that person. Now, this is made off of inductive reasoning. If you have this understanding that that person will kill again, then I think you have a philosophical justification for detaining it. Now,
but if somebody is predetermined to have that intent, then how is it their fault?
Oh, well, his question is really, how is it different? It's not really that
From
different.
a freak accident causing a brain state and a murder.
Yeah, it's really not different. Like if somebody, like people have been shown to have tumors in their brain, and the tumor in their brain, it could affect with the part of their brain that has to do with their sexual desires, and they do horrible things. They have pedophilic desires, or they have desires to rape, and they go about doing these things. And we've also found that when those tumors are removed, these people stop having that happen. So it's not really that different in that the only difference is that consciousness is involved, and we treat conscious and unconscious things differently.
I was going to jump in. I was going to say the underlying question then is, why do we hold people responsible for the things they do? And I don't know, call me out if that's not the actual question or the underlying question.
That's basically it.
Right. Well, I thought that was the underlying question, and that is why I started with it.
Well, I want to go back just to, we are programmable flesh machines. So what you do is you input experiences into a person who thinks those kind of things are justified.
I think the justification is the desire for minimizing suffering. And if you have sufficient reason to think that somebody is going to go about causing the suffering of others, and you ought to do that which minimizes suffering, and detaining minimizes, then you ought to detain that person. Yeah, so I think we can justify it without it.
Yeah.
Well, and I think justification and morality are a completely different discussion. Like you may commit an immoral act, but it may be justifiable due to the limitations of the world that we live in, right?
Mm-hmm.
But I think T-Jump brings up a really good point there, saying that, the action of a rock and the action of a person are just about the same because they're both predetermined.
They're both predetermined, but one's conscious and can go about doing this again. The rock that's fallen isn't going to go climb back up to the hill and continue falling. So we don't really have to worry about it. It sucks that rock fell, but that rock isn't conscious and it already did that. And for the same reason, if somebody was conscious, committed a crime, and then died, we wouldn't jail them for that same reason. It's they minimized someone else's pleasure. They caused suffering, but they also can't do it anymore. So if they can't do it anymore, if they're now dead, then we don't have a reason to jail them. So if they're alive, they can do it again. So that's what separates us from rocks. Is a rock hitting you is, they're the same in that a rock causing you harm and me causing you harm are both events that were caused by, let's just say, events that were both determined by causation within the natural world. So they have that in common. The difference is simply that consciousness is involved in one of them. And if your question is why would we treat a conscious thing and an unconscious thing differently? It's because they are different. And it makes sense to say, okay, jailing a rock for it falling down and killing someone, it doesn't minimize suffering to go put that rock in a jail cell. But we can justify saying that it would minimize suffering to take a person who deliberately did something like that.
Well, I don't think it's necessarily about what we ought to do to the thing that creates the immoral act. It's just whether or not the act is immoral.
Well, I think that morality is, I think doing an immoral thing is doing something that you ought not do.
And that rock ought not fall on my head, because I don't will it to. And it imposes on, and it makes me suffer.
Right. But again, it doesn't have any consciousness in it. So it minimized you, it caused you to suffer,
I think that we should set up a discussion between you and T Jump. I think
that'd be good.
That would be awesome if we could make that happen.
Right.
Well, I was about to say, I was going to say maybe the question isn't so much holding the rock. Like it's like, why wouldn't we hold the rock responsible? So jumping on, if I was on Shane's side here, it's like, yeah, I mean, it ought not do it, but what are we going to do?
I mean, we could almost say, I don't know if responsibility is the word, but it's not blameworthy. So we could say the rock is responsible for that happening, but it's not blameworthy. Or someone would probably ask why not. And again, my question is simply like, we treat conscious and unconscious things differently because they are different and they require different treatment.
Well, I'll tell you what, this is already patent pending. I'm getting my own rock rehabilitation. And I have one more question before we wrap up Q&A. Do you have something real quick?
Oh my gosh.
You unmuted for some reason. So
did I?
All right, he's fair enough.
Okay.
Yeah. Usually we like to see Oz muted, but when he unmutes, sometimes we grant him a word or two.
Then we hear him talk.
Yeah. Anyway, we got what is it? Witterschniz? I'm trying to. Well, I got to mispronounce something, so that's Witterschniz. So we have the ability to choose between our priorities, but not what our priorities are.
So we have the ability to choose between our priorities, but not the decision what our options are. No, I don't think you have the ability to choose between your priorities. You know, if you're somebody who prioritizes your children more than you prioritize your relationship, you couldn't have not done that. And like your desire is caused by your psychology, which you can't act out of accordance with. So you really don't get to choose what you prioritize.
Oh, and here's a re-questioned or rephrased of the same question with desires.
We have the ability to organize the priorities we have between various desires, but not the free will to decide what our desires are. I think that's right on the money.
Fair enough.
And it's like, I think that you could actually pull out even more and like think about it from a bigger umbrella, like, well, what caused those underlying desires?
Right.
You know, that would still be a natural process. So I think that's just moving the idea further back.
Right.
Well, that's all the questions that I have for today. Thanks for stopping by the Murdershed, where answers get questioned.
Looking for a new and challenging opportunity? Do you have previous landscaping, mortuary, or medical experience? Are you available to work flexible hours, including nights and weekends? Are you ready to get involved in a business where you can simply make a killing? If you answered yes to these questions, then the Murdershed Steve Intern Program wants to hear from you. Registration for the 2021 season is now underway. Contact us today for an information package to get you started. Many valuable perks are available for those willing to reach out and grab them. Qualified participants must agree to have street epistemology applied to anything they say.
Oh, God, that's scary. God, that's scary. Oh,
just watching intently.
Man.
Watching you.
Oh God. That just ruined my entire evening, Steve. Oh, I got to erase that out of my head. But Shane, thanks for being on with us, man.
Yeah, thanks for having me on. And I hope to come back on maybe the next time I'm on, whether it be the discussion with T-Jump or we could have a discussion about nihilism and maybe why I think nihilism is actually an optimistic thing. Because that's another far-fetched claim. People go, you think nihilism, which is the most depressing philosophy I could think of, is a happy thing? And my answer is, yeah, it's like the happiest philosophy that there is. I've found the most joy in life not having meaning assigned to it than I have in anything else. So,
yeah, and I think that's another one that we enjoy because often tied to is like, oh, nihilism is just it's it's torturous and it's negative and it fucks up society and yada yada yada. You know, I think that's one that's worth having.
Yeah, I mean, I used to think that a nihilist was making the claim that nothing mattered to them, but now I realize, like, no, that's not what they're saying. They're saying that meaning and value were not intrinsic, and you know, when you realize that, it's like, oh, okay, so life can have meaning. I get to decide what that meaning is. Oh, wait, that's actually better. So people are like, you know, it's almost like I've heard this. This is from a meme, so don't give me credit for this, but I've seen people say, like, asking somebody if there isn't a God, in other words, if there isn't an intrinsic meaning, like, if there isn't a God, what is my purpose? And it's like, or it's like asking, if there isn't a slave, whose master will I be?
Yeah, Dan
like,
Barker.
no, the whole point is that you don't have a master because you aren't a slave. Go be free, but not with free will.
I think the book is Life Driven Purpose by Dan Barker, meant to be like the exact opposite of Purpose Driven Life.
Right. Yeah. I mean, it's like I'm a very emotional person, and I like with all emotions, like everybody would probably say that about me. And it just happens to be the case that I have a lot of value for kindness, happiness, joy, pleasure. You know, if I see somebody suffering, I am immediately like, okay, what can I do to make that person feel better? And it fucks with me if I can't. Like, if something really bad just happened to someone and there's nothing I can do, I will sit there and think about, like, what are ways I can minimize that suffering. Now, I can't choose to have those desires, but they seem to be going well as far as it goes. So I'm happy.
I got to tell you, I'm really good at making suffering end really quick.
we
really
know
good
that.
at it.
Okay.
We know.
Okay.
But what I want to do before we wrap up, there's a few comments, not questions, just comments I want to throw up there. Just have a little fun before we end. This is something that I started. I want to start doing at the end of the show, just to get some of the more entertaining ones up there that we don't get to throughout the show. And as soon as I say that, a bunch of comments pop up, and I lose them. Oh, here we go. So we'll start this because we had a show last night, and we ended it, and we had several people hanging out like backstage, and I even went to bed. It was like 5 or 6 a.m., whatever it was, and these sons of bitches were still up chatting to like 8, 9 a.m., something like that. But Grumpy said sleep is for the weak. I agree. Y'all are even better than me, because I always say sleep is the cousin of death. But y'all represent it better than I do.
Sleep is for the weak. That I'm gonna go tell that to everyone at work. I'm a grocery stocker, so I work overnight. I'm gonna go tell everyone sleep is for the weak. That's why we don't get as much as normal people, because we're superior. I mean,
on a related note, though, it does prevent Alzheimer's. Just saying.
Really?
Yeah.
Well, at least it
brain.
also shortens your lifespan, though. So, I mean, yeah, you might not get Alzheimer's, but you're gonna fucking die sooner.
Bring it now. That's why I slept until noon today.
Anybody named Murdershed Steve, I'm not taking life advice from. I
can see that.
Where answers get questions, where answers get questions should be on a shirt. Maybe
it should be on a shirt.
Maybe.
Okay.
Maybe on the back.
Nihilism is the best.
Yes, it is.
Like, it doesn't really matter though. Like, you know.
Well, yeah, and a lot of people need to realize is like, okay, if I'm going to talk to you about why I think nihilism is optimistic, just know that whether or not nihilism is optimistic is completely irrelevant of whether or not it's true. So if I can't make the case for nihilism being optimistic, that doesn't mean that therefore nihilism must be false. It might just be the case that, oh, if nihilism's true, then the world sucks. Oh, the world sucks, therefore not, you know. And one thought that I had about nihilism before I became a nihilist was that I wish I could be a nihilist, because if nothing really matters, then nothing really sucks. Like, yeah, there's a lot of good in the world, but there's a lot of bad shit too. And yeah, the good shit would stop mattering, but so would the bad shit, right? But now I realize that I still have meaning, I still have value. It's just that it's not intrinsic, and I get to dictate what it is.
Absolutely.
Things just are.
And there, Grumpy said it there a little before the other post I put up. I'm still recovering from last night's late night backstage. Yeah, it was that was long.
You know what? I noticed that there were no more olives left in the Atheist green room. I bet it was Grumpy. Ate up all the olives.
It was definitely grumpy here. This is the last couple I'll share, and then there's one more popped up, so it might be that one. But I was predetermined to be cool.
Yeah, you couldn't have been a loser. You were already cool.
Well,
And
it's
then-
not too late.
And then T-Jump,
Might be.
T-Jump being a Mac Daddy, I'm predetermined to be jealous of your coolness.
Hey,
Wow, wow, wow. That's what we do here at the Atheist Roundtable. We make chat room connections. Where'd it go? There was one more. Sounds like missed a good conversation. Yes, you did, Jim Benton. Absolutely.
Well, fortunately, it's not only on the live stream, right? So
Yep.
at least you can go back and watch it.
Yep, and there's actually a couple people who jumped in and said that. It was like, oh man, I'm gonna have to go back and check the rest of this. So,
Nice.
So yeah, we'll do that. And Shane, whether it's getting you back on with T-Jump or talking about nihilism or whatever, man, we'll get you back on for sure. And we appreciate you coming on. And I always like to close with guests and ask you: is there anything that you would like to say, just from the atheist conversation, not to do with determinism or nihilism, but just from the atheist part of the conversation, for anybody that may be coming out of a deeply held belief and doubt, questioning, skepticism has started to creep in? Is there anything that you'd like to say to them?
I would like to say to that person, be honest, not only with your interlocutors, but with yourself. Ask a lot of questions and genuinely seek the answers. Do not only listen to people like me and other atheists, also listen to Christians. Like, try to be somebody who listens to the opposing view. I have had plenty of conversations, debates, where the person was completely disingenuous, and all that really made me do was question if they're actually as confident as they were saying they were. So if you believe you have the truth on your side, then you have no motive to lie, no motive to be dishonest with anyone else or yourself. So if I am mistaken, if all of us are mistaken and there is a God, I want you to believe things that are true. So if I want you to believe things that are true, and it's true that a God exists, then I want you to believe in a God. But because I want you to not believe in things that are not true, and I think it is not true, or I do not think it is true that a God exists, I don't think you should think that a God exists. And I actually think that the belief in a God can actually be really harmful. And I don't want to spend too long talking about why that is, but if you have a God who is causing you to suffer, deliberately causing you to suffer, and is capable of not doing that to you, then I think you should question how you would judge the morality or the character of a person that you knew if they were deliberately causing you to suffer, even though they didn't have to.
Well said. In a short sentence, well said. And thank you again, Shane. And guys, hang out for a minute. We'll run the outro here, and we'll go backstage. But remember, tomorrow night at 8 p.m. Eastern Time, we have a TART Live debate night session going on. It's going to be awesome. Eddie and Mike B, they're going to be here. So thank you, everybody that's been in the chat. We appreciate it. Appreciate your support. All the Patreons, members, all that. We'll see you tomorrow night.
Welcome to Let's Get It, the Atheist Roundtable.
That was terrible. Let's do that again.
Pastor Mike, what you doing? What up with Eddie? Why he sweaty on your noodle? I don't get it. He lost his shit. The whole kid caboodle. Now pause. You pause. Everybody tell him that he's a lost cause. Who's the ass in the hat? Half Christian ass. Always talking this and talking that. And Benji on the epistemology. You got claims, got beliefs. What's your confidence? And is it relevant? Nah. Just Jeff. What's next? What text you gonna put to the test? Put to the test, little troll face weasel on TikTok looking like a beetle juice. And what do you do when a member of your crew sits in a shed with the dead? I don't know what's up. Anybody seen T-Jump? Now the newest member of the crew. The TART debut. Here's your preview. It's K Nabs. She says she's the live stream queen. Welcome to the team. Yeah. Welcome to the team.
The Atheist Roundtable.
Is faith a reliable pathway to truth?
Hey, yo, Oz, are we going on a deep dive?
Faith